I'm losing it, you're losing it, Canada's losing it. What is it? It's free speech. Hello and welcome to Losing It. I'm your host, Stephanie Hunter, and I was inspired to start this channel for a variety of reasons, but today I'd like to talk to you about my main mission with this channel, which is to encourage free speech. Canada in the recent decade has put in legislation that restricts free speech or has the potential to restrict free speech, and our current social and political climate, I think, causes people to self-censor and not use their expression of free speech. And I think when it comes to free speech, if your society isn't using it, it's unfortunately losing it. So why is free speech even important? Well, I think it's the backbone of a functioning society. No communist, fascist, or otherwise authoritarian dictatorship or government has been able to coexist with genuine free speech. I think it's important to know what people around us are thinking, how they got there, challenge our own perspectives, find common ground. And without free speech, we actually have no idea what the people around us are thinking or feeling or voting for. So whether we agree or not, I think it's important that both of us use our expression of free speech. So on this channel, I'm going to be sharing my opinions publicly. They might be your opinions, they might not be your opinions, probably not all your opinions, but I would really encourage you to also use your free speech, whether it's in the micro scale, within your friendships and your family, or at work when you see something that doesn't align with your values, or when you see something that does. Or if you wanted to do it publicly, then I encourage you to hop online or some kind of other public forum and speak your mind. One of the cultural elements that I think is contributing to this sort of Canadian predicament of free speech is the political and social idea of woke. And I think this not because I've always judged woke thought harshly. In fact, I used to be myself quite woke. And I want to talk about how I've changed my mind on certain beliefs that I had and why I think it's really important to think critically and talk to one another. So when I graduated high school in 2014, I left my hometown of Calgary to go to Western University, where I was doing a music administrative studies bachelor's. And just by chance, I got put on a floor dedicated to being an LGBTQA plus safe space. Now, this was a really interesting floor to be on, and this is not a comment on any individual that I met while there, because I knew some great people, and I knew some people I didn't get along with that well, but that's just the nature of going to university and meeting new people. But I think what was really interesting about this floor is that because of the interests of the people generally who resided on this floor, it seemed to be a microcosm and a very distilled atmosphere of some of the ideological practices that were starting to emerge on campus. A lot of people on the floor were studying women and gender studies, literature, sociology, music. There were definitely some people doing maths and hard sciences, but a lot of people on the floor were in the more, I would say, ideologically driven faculties. And on this floor, socially, I found very quickly that it was not going to be a popular choice to criticize or question the things that people were bringing from their classes and wanting to talk about at the lunch table. For example, I remember putting up a bit of a protest when someone said, "You can't be racist to white people," or "There are absolutely no differences between men and women, it's just socialization." And it very quickly caught on that that would get me ostracized from my peers, and so I stopped questioning, and in fact, I bought into the ideology, and I even started propagating it myself. In university, I took a variety of classes, and I did notice that certain faculties had an ideological lean. For example, I was in a Canadian literature course where the professor proudly stood in front of the class on the first day and said, "If you look at the syllabus, you will see that there are no white authors this year that we are going to be learning about." That gave me pause for thought, even in my fairly brainwashed state. This was probably third year at this point. And I thought, well, I don't really care about the race of the people whose work we're studying on a substantive level, but ideologically, it would be crazy for you to stand at the top of the class and say that about any other race. And I just found that very odd. And this was the sort of political lean that if you looked closely, you could see in a lot of classes that I was taking in university. So while at university, it wasn't just that I was attending classes that had an ideological tilt, and it wasn't just that I was involved in a social circle that had sort of a social mandate for belief. It was also that I was consuming media solely that contributed to and agreed with my new worldview. I was, attending lectures on intersectionality and learning from YouTube about niche sexual orientations and niche gender identities. I was listening to podcasts that did critical theory breakdowns of popular media I was interested in from childhood. And I never, ever listened to one podcast, watched one news reel, saw one article that actually offered a difference of opinion. And when I'd come into contact with difference of opinion, like when I came home from school and would chat with my friends and family in Calgary, I would get very emotional. I would think, oh my gosh, this is the compassionate way to be. This is the right way to think. You are thinking wrong. And I think I got so emotional because when I was confronted by actual facts and logic, I didn't really have anything other than ideology to back up what I was saying. So that was really the only option left to me. And I think what I would tell myself then, that I now know, now that I've sort of done a lot of critical thinking and retrained myself to assess a wide variety of source material, and I find my opinions have changed and I lean more towards the Canadian brand of conservatism, is that the people who disagree with you don't not care. They're not compassionate. They do care, and most people do care. They have a difference in opinion of really the underpinnings of reality, and they also have a difference in opinion of what actually helps people. And often in conservative circles, that means not interfering as much and not as much government overreach. I'm also finding that my sense of justice now pertains to individuals, and I meet people and, perceive people on an individual level, and I don't perceive them as part of a group based on chosen or immutable characteristics. So what unwoke me up, so to say? I think leaving university and taking time away from political thinking did help a bit. I left university, I was working in restaurants, I was getting my wine designations, and I was really focused on stuff outside of politics. And I was making friends with people who had a lot of different opinions, and that was really good. And eventually I moved to Vancouver to be with my now husband. And when we were in Vancouver, the COVID pandemic hit, and I had friends there who had really different opinions than mine. Friends who did not want to take the COVID vaccine, who really disagreed with government mandates. And as the pandemic wore on, I found myself seeing where they were coming from. I think the lockdowns reached a point where they were past their point of usefulness, and I began to lose a lot of faith in our institutions, and I saw things that were being reported and being communicated that I did not think were true and that I really had doubts about. And that sort of helped get me thinking about what else I believed that might not be true. You see, at this point in my life, though I wasn't thinking politically on a massive level, I think if you had asked me a political question, I would definitely have just spewed back some sort of woke talking point that I'd seen in a friend's infographic on their Instagram story, or that I'd heard in a video at some point, and I don't think I actually would have taken the time to think about it. In fact, I know I wouldn't have actually taken the time to think about it. And I think the big one that really unwoke me up, so to speak, was the J.K. Rowling cancellation. Now, the cancellation happened a while before I actually looked into it, but the Harry Potter reunion was about to air, and people were saying things like, you can't engage with this author, you can't engage with this media, how to engage with this media without rewarding the author. And I thought, well, this is really crazy. This is her work. If you enjoy her work, then she should reap the rewards of that because she worked hard for it. So I decided to look into her cancellation because I love Harry Potter, love, love, love. And I was not about to cancel the author of it without making sure that I was absolutely morally obligated based on her beliefs to cancel her, which is also just not something I really subscribe to anymore. But I'm glad I looked into it because what I found was a really outsized reaction to what I saw at the time as being an opinion that just was different than mine. And I thought that the abuse that was being hurled at her from people I knew and liked and respected and had the same compassionate ideas as me was just insane to see. And it was a huge red flag. And it really made me start thinking about a lot of this stuff. And it really made me start looking into sort of critical theory and woke ideology and why it wasn't really adding up. And I think it was causing some cognitive dissonance in my life and was actually making me less happy because it just didn't make sense and it didn't actually align with my values. So now I do still listen to those woke podcasts I listened to when I was in university. I still subscribe to a lot of the same podcasts, a lot of the same YouTube channels, a lot of the same Instagram accounts. But I also subscribe to other forms of media and other accounts that give a different perspective. I subscribe to conservative, libertarian, all kinds of people. And I like to hear all their opinions, even if I don't agree with them. And then I make decisions about what I believe. And I'm open to changing my mind when new information comes. And I think that's a really healthy way to live. And I think a lot of people maybe are scared to speak up because there's this sort of feeling, I think socially right now, that if you take a stand and you say something, even if it's just on your Instagram story, then people are just going to always assume that's what you think and no one can change their mind. And I just think that's silly. I think if you're not changing your mind about things over a decent course of time ever, that you're probably just not thinking. So I still have a lot of people in my life, a lot of acquaintances, a lot of friends who subscribe to this woke thinking, and I don't think they're bad people at all. I just think that this ideology is toxic, and I think the social enforcing of it is toxic, and so that's really what I wanted to talk about. Now, my grandma always told me that it takes all kinds to make the world go round, and I think that's really true. It takes conservatives just as much as it takes progressives to make sure that we're moving forward in society without making foolish errors, without diving into progressive ideas that are actually going to harm society, that are based on untested theories, for example. And so I am glad that there's people who are left of center who feel comfortable speaking up in Canada. I just wish that there was more people who felt comfortable speaking up in Canada who were from a variety of different political factions or had a variety of different ideas, and that our dialogue was like a little more heterodox, I guess. I think we also need to talk about the sort of difference in the level that this woke ideology seems to be seductive to women over men. I see a lot of my peers who are female getting really wrapped up in this ideology, and some of my peers that are male get wrapped up in it too, but I just don't think it's as common. And I think part of that is that it really targets young women especially, but all women's inclination to be pro-social and to be compassionate, and it really weaponizes that. I think female dynamics, social dynamics, just put a greater emphasis on being accepted by the group and also on rejecting those who do not fall in line. I made a political post on my Instagram story around the election just stating why I was going to vote conservative and how I hadn't really seen anyone talking about it from my perspective. And overwhelmingly, I got messages from women who reached out to say that they agreed with me, but that they would never post because they were afraid for their job or afraid for their social well-being, or that they just didn't want to be political. And I get it. I mean, I was there until literally yesterday, but I also think it's sad. Women have a lot to say, and I think they should speak up even if they don't agree with sort of the socially acceptable set of beliefs that are set out by female social spaces. And it also was overwhelmingly females who blocked me, unfollowed me, and sent kind of rude messages about my post. And that just is what it is. I think there's beauty and difficulty to the female dynamic. And I think that this ideology actually exploits both sides of that coin to keep women compliant. So on this channel, my goal is to express my free speech by sharing my views publicly. And these are topics that I wish I saw being discussed in Canadian culture from a perspective similar to mine. And they're also topics that I want to encourage other people to have opinions on, whether they agree with mine or not. But I do want to stress that I'm not an expert in anything I'm talking about. And there is definitely a place for experts. I engage with experts' work all the time. I'm always trying to read up, and I read a lot of books, listen to a lot of podcasts. see a lot of videos, watch documentaries, and that is the place for experts, and they're doing an amazing job. But I don't think you have to be an expert to have a public opinion and to engage in civil discourse, because we all vote, and we all have a vote that is worth the same, and I think it's our civil obligation to be as educated in cultural and political and economic matters as we possibly can. So there's also, sadly, a bit of doubt that I have on certain types of expertise because of the ideological lean that I saw at my time in university. And so, yeah, I think it's also good to question authority and to question experts when you see things with your own eyes and use your own brain to logic out that things aren't making sense. And I just think that's also an important thing to do. So if any of that resonates with you, maybe follow this channel, maybe share it with a friend. If you have sort of a long form comment or piece that you'd like to say and maybe engage with the show in a more anonymous way, you can send it to stephislosinit@gmail.com. It's losing it without the G, but I'll put it on the screen here. And yeah, I would say if you want to leave a comment, please go ahead and leave a comment. I encourage you to use your free speech, but keep it polite. We're Canadian, for goodness sake, eh? Thanks. See you next week.